Society taught us that money is something you chase, that if you work harder, sacrifice more, and push yourself long enough, money will eventually reward you. Most people believed that. They believed it when they were young. They believed it when they chose their careers. They believed it when they stayed late, skipped rest, and told themselves that exhaustion was a sign of progress. And for a while, it seemed to make sense. Until one day, money started feeling confusing. The harder they tried, the less clear things became. The more effort they poured in, the more anxious they felt. Not because they were lazy, not because they lacked intelligence, but because something fundamental about the way they understood money was incomplete. Imagine standing in front of a heavy door. You push with all your strength. You lean your body into it. You try again tomorrow and the next day, even harder. But the door doesn't move. Not because you're weak, but because you're pushing in the wrong direction. Money works the same way. There is an invisible law behind how money moves in and out of people's lives. A law that doesn't respond to effort. A law that doesn't care how badly you want something. A law that operates quietly, consistently, and without emotion. Like gravity, it doesn't ask for your belief. It simply works. When you don't understand this law, money always feels unstable. It comes and goes. It creates pressure instead of peace. It feels personal when things go wrong, as if you failed some invisible test. But when you begin to see this law clearly, something shifts. Money stops feeling emotional. It stops feeling mysterious. It stops feeling like a reward you're constantly trying to earn. It starts to make sense. Look back at your own life. There were moments when you weren't trying that hard, yet things flowed naturally. Opportunities appeared. Decisions felt lighter. Progress happened without constant struggle. And there were other times when you did everything right. You followed the rules. You worked harder than ever. Yet the results never arrived. That wasn't luck, and it wasn't random. It was feedback, a signal showing you that money doesn't respond to force. It responds to alignment. Most people never notice this. They assume the answer is more effort, more pressure, more urgency. So they double down on the very behavior that creates resistance. The wealthy rarely do that. Not because they are smarter, not because they work less, but because they understand something early. Money is not the goal. It is the result. Money follows structure. It follows clarity. It follows systems that are designed to function whether or not you are exhausted. This is why trying harder often makes money feel worse. Effort applied in the wrong direction doesn't create progress. It creates friction. The moment money begins to make sense is the moment you stop asking, "How do I get more?" and start asking, "What is causing money to leak from my life in the first place?" That question changes everything. When you see money as feedback instead of judgment, you stop reacting emotionally. You stop chasing outcomes. You start observing patterns. And in that observation, a new state appears. That state has a name. It's called clarity. Clarity is not motivation, and it's not discipline, it's not hustle. Clarity is knowing which actions compound and which ones only consume energy. It's understanding what actually creates value over time and what only creates the illusion of progress. When clarity arrives, decisions become simpler. Not easier, simpler. You say no more often. You stop explaining yourself. You stop mistaking movement for momentum, and money responds. Not dramatically, not overnight, but inevitably, like a river. Once you stop swimming against the current and start moving with the flow. This audiobook is not about tactics. It's not about shortcuts, and it's not about becoming rich quickly. It's about understanding the one thing that, once seen, cannot be unseen. Because when you understand this, money stops feeling complicated. And that is where everything begins. Chapter 1. The collective belief that breaks people. Financially, Most financial problems do not begin with money. They begin with an idea so familiar that it rarely gets questioned, an idea repeated so often that it feels like common sense, an idea quietly passed from parents to children, from teachers to students, from managers to employees. That idea is this: if you work hard enough, money will eventually work out. At first, this belief feels comforting. It suggests fairness. It implies control. It tells people that effort will be rewarded and sacrifice will not be wasted. So people build their lives around it. They wake up early. They stay late. They push through fatigue. They delay rest, joy, and stillness, believing all of it will pay off someday. And for a while, it seems to work. Bills get paid. Careers progress. Life moves forward. But beneath the surface, something begins to feel off. Money never feels settled. Security always feels temporary. No matter how much progress is made, the sense of ease never arrives. Instead of clarity, there is tension. Instead of confidence, there is constant calculation. Instead of freedom, there is pressure to maintain momentum. This is where the belief begins to break people. Because when money is built on effort alone, every slowdown feels dangerous. Rest feels irresponsible. Pauses feel like failure. People begin to measure their worth by productivity, their safety by income, their future by how long they can keep pushing. And that creates a fragile relationship with money. The belief does not teach people how money actually behaves. It teaches them how to endure. Endurance becomes the strategy. Busyness becomes the signal of progress. Exhaustion becomes normalized. But money does not respond to exhaustion. Money responds to structure. This is the truth most people are never shown. When effort is treated as the primary driver of wealth, people design their lives around motion instead of direction. They add more activity instead of removing friction. They chase higher numbers without understanding the system underneath them. As a result, money feels unpredictable. Not because it is chaotic, but because the framework guiding it is unstable. The wealthy do not reject effort. They simply do not worship it. They understand that effort without alignment creates noise, not results. They understand that repetition matters more than intensity. They understand that what compounds is not energy, but behavior. This is the quiet divide. Most people ask, how can I work harder? The wealthy ask, what continues to work even when I stop? That question changes the entire architecture of a financial life. When effort is the belief, time is traded aggressively. Attention is scattered. Decisions multiply. When structure becomes the belief, subtraction begins. Fewer commitments. Fewer reactions, fewer emotional choices. Clarity replaces urgency. The collective belief never encourages this pause. It frames stillness as weakness. It glorifies constant motion. And over time, this creates resentment. People begin to feel betrayed by money. They feel like they followed the rules and were denied the outcome. They internalize financial stress as a personal flaw instead of a systemic misunderstanding. Fear enters the picture. Fear shortens time horizons. Fear pushes people towards short-term relief. Fear turns money into a source of anxiety instead of a tool. This is how the belief keeps reinforcing itself. More pressure leads to worse decisions. Worse decisions create instability. Instability convinces people that money is inherently stressful, but money is not emotional. People are. Money simply reflects the systems it flows through. When the system is built on constant output, money feels volatile. When the system is built on clarity, money feels consistent. The collective belief hides this distinction by making struggle feel noble. But struggle is not a requirement, and exhaustion is not proof of progress. The wealthy are careful with energy. They avoid unnecessary complexity. They protect attention like capital. Not because they are passive, but because they understand leverage. They know that one aligned decision, repeated calmly over time, outperforms endless effort applied without direction. Imagine rowing a boat upstream. The harder you row, the more heroic it feels. The more tired you become, the more committed you believe you are. But the wealthy step back and study the river. They ask where it flows. They position themselves accordingly. They let direction do what force never could. Money behaves the same way. When you align with how it moves, progress feels steady. When you fight it, progress feels exhausting. The collective belief never teaches alignment. It teaches endurance. And endurance without understanding eventually breaks people. The moment you begin questioning this belief, something subtle changes. You stop asking why money feels so hard. You start asking whether the model you were given was ever designed to work. That question creates space. In that space, blame dissolves. Pressure softens, and clarity begins to form. Wealth does not begin with more effort. It begins with releasing a belief that was never meant to guide you for a lifetime. Chapter 2. Money is not the goal, it's the result. Most people grow up believing that money is the destination, the finish line, the thing you are supposed to reach. More money means you're doing well. Less money means something is wrong. This belief quietly shapes every decision people make. They choose careers based on income instead of sustainability. They accept pressure in exchange for pay. They tolerate environments that drain them because the money feels like justification. Money becomes the goal, and when money becomes the goal, everything else becomes negotiable. Time, energy, health, clarity. At first, this trade seems reasonable. Money solves problems. Money creates options. Money feels like freedom. But over time, something subtle happens. The pursuit never ends. No amount ever feels complete. No milestone ever brings lasting relief. Each achievement only resets the baseline. And slowly, money stops feeling like a tool and starts feeling like a judge. This is where most people get trapped. They chase money directly without realizing that money does not respond to being chased. Money is not the cause. It is the consequence. It is the output of a system. When you treat money as the goal, you focus on outcomes instead of inputs. You ask, how much can I make? Instead of asking, what am I building that continues to work? This difference seems small, but it changes everything. The wealthy understand that money is feedback. It reflects how well a system is designed, how consistently value is created, and how aligned behavior is over time. They do not wake up thinking about money first. They think about positioning. They think about durability. They think about whether what they are doing still works if conditions change. Money arrives later. This is why people who chase money often feel anxious, while people who build systems feel calm. Anxiety comes from dependence. Calm comes from structure. When income depends entirely on effort, money feels fragile. When money depends on systems, it feels stable. Most people never experience this difference because they were never taught to separate money from meaning. Money is treated as proof. Proof of success. Proof of intelligence. Proof of worth. And once money becomes proof, losing it feels personal. But money was never meant to carry that weight. Money is a signal. It signals whether decisions are aligned with reality. It signals whether energy is being directed effectively. It signals whether time is being invested or consumed. When you understand this, you stop asking money to validate you. You start asking it to inform you. This shift is quiet but powerful. The wealthy rarely define success by how much they earn in a single moment. They define it by how little they have to force. They notice when things feel heavy. They notice when systems require constant attention just to survive. They notice when progress depends on urgency instead of rhythm. These are warning signs. Not to work harder, but to step back and redesign. Money follows clarity. Clarity about what matters. Clarity about what compounds. Clarity about what can be repeated without draining the person creating it. When clarity is missing, money feels chaotic. When clarity is present, money becomes predictable. Not fast, not dramatic, but dependable. This is why money often increases after people simplify, not after they accelerate. They stop chasing every opportunity. They stop reacting to every signal. They reduce decisions until only the essential ones remain. And in that reduction, systems begin to breathe. Money is the result of that breathing. It arrives not because of ambition, but because friction was removed. This is also why many people experience brief financial success, only to lose it later. The money arrived before the system was stable. The result came before the foundation was strong. Without structure, money has nowhere to stay. It leaks through lifestyle inflation. It disappears through emotional spending. It vanishes through poorly timed decisions. People assume the problem was discipline, but discipline cannot compensate for a broken model. The wealthy rarely depend on discipline alone. They depend on design. They design environments that reduce temptation. They design routines that support consistency. They design financial lives that do not require constant willpower. And because of that, money stays. Money is not loyal to effort. It is loyal to structure. The moment you stop treating money as the prize and start treating it as the byproduct, pressure dissolves. You no longer rush decisions. You no longer measure progress emotionally. You no longer panic when growth slows. You understand that outcomes lag inputs. You allow time to do its work. And over time, money begins to feel different. Not exciting, not intimidating, but neutral. A signal that reflects alignment. This is the moment money starts making sense. Not because you have more of it, but because you no longer need it to prove anything. Money becomes quieter when it is no longer the goal. And in that quiet, real wealth begins to form. Chapter 3. The invisible law that governs money. Most people believe money is chaotic, unpredictable, random. They see one person succeed quickly, another struggle for decades, and assume the difference is luck, timing, or talent. But money is not chaotic. What feels random is simply a system you do not yet see. Behind every financial outcome, good or bad, there is a law at work, not a rule written down, not a strategy taught in school, but a pattern that repeats with quiet consistency. The invisible law is this: money does not move toward effort, it moves toward alignment. This is the point where many people get uncomfortable. Because alignment sounds vague, abstract, almost intangible. But alignment is not mystical, it is structural. Alignment means your decisions, behaviors, environment, and time horizon are pointing in the same direction. When they are not, money leaks. When they are, money accumulates. Most people never see this law because they are trained to look at money in isolation, income without context, spending without behavior, results without systems. They ask why money comes and goes without examining the structure it flows through. Money behaves like water. It does not argue. It does not judge. It simply follows the path with the least resistance. If your financial life is full of friction, emotional decisions, constant urgency, unclear priorities, money passes through quickly. Not because you are irresponsible, but because the system cannot hold it. The wealthy understand this early. They don't ask, "How do I get more money?" They ask, "What environment am I creating for money to stay?" That single question changes behavior. Instead of forcing outcomes, they reduce resistance. Instead of reacting, they design. Instead of chasing, they position. They understand that money amplifies what already exists. If your life is scattered, money amplifies chaos. If your life is structured, money amplifies stability. This is why sudden money often disappears. Without alignment, an increase in income does not create wealth. It exposes weaknesses. Spending habits accelerate. Lifestyle expands. Decisions become louder, not wiser. People blame themselves for lacking discipline. But discipline is not the core issue. Structure is. The invisible law does not punish or reward. It reflects. It reflects how decisions are made. It reflects how time is treated. It reflects whether value creation is consistent or accidental. Most people never pause long enough to see this reflection. They are too busy adjusting outcomes instead of examining inputs. But once you see the law, money begins to feel predictable. Not immediately, not dramatically, but logically. You start noticing patterns. Money increases when decisions become fewer and clearer. Money stabilizes when time horizons lengthen. Money stays when emotions stop driving behavior. This is not coincidence. It is alignment. The wealthy rarely describe this process because it feels obvious to them. Like gravity, they don't think in terms of winning or losing money. They think in terms of maintaining coherence. They ask whether their actions reinforce each other or cancel each other out. They avoid situations where money must be constantly defended. They avoid environments that reward short-term validation. They protect calm. Calm is not comfort. Calm is control, and control is what allows systems to compound. Most people misunderstand compounding. They think it is about numbers growing faster, but compounding begins long before numbers appear. It begins with habits that do not require constant motivation, with choices that feel repeatable, with decisions that age well. When alignment exists, compounding becomes inevitable. When it does not, effort replaces strategy. This is why two people with similar incomes can experience completely different financial lives. One adds complexity with every dollar earned. The other adds stability. One expands consumption. The other expands margin. One reacts to money, and the other lets money react to structure. The invisible law does not care which one you choose. It simply responds. Once you understand this, you stop moralizing money. You stop seeing outcomes as proof of worth or failure. You see them as signals. Signals that something is aligned or not. And signals can be adjusted. Not through pressure, not through force, but through clarity. Clarity about what matters. Clarity about what repeats. Clarity about what you are willing to ignore. The law is always operating, whether you notice it or not. But the moment you begin designing your life around alignment instead of effort, money starts behaving differently. Quieter, steadier, more predictable. Not because you are chasing it better, but because you finally understand what it has been responding to all along. Chapter 4. Why trying harder often makes money worse. When money feels tight, the instinct is almost automatic. You try harder, you work longer hours, you say yes more often. You push through discomfort and tell yourself that pressure is temporary. Trying harder feels responsible. It feels mature. It feels like what a serious person is supposed to do. But in many cases, trying harder doesn't fix money problems. It intensifies them. This is one of the most difficult ideas for people to accept, because effort feels virtuous, and questioning effort feels like weakness. But money does not improve simply because effort increases. Effort amplifies whatever system is already in place. If the system is aligned, effort helps. If the system is misaligned, effort accelerates the damage. This is why many people feel financially exhausted without feeling financially secure. They're working harder inside a structure that was never designed to create stability. Trying harder adds speed. It does not add direction, and speed without direction creates noise. When people try harder, they often make money decisions under pressure. Pressure narrows attention. Narrow attention shortens time horizons. Short time horizons create reactive behavior. People take opportunities they would normally decline. They accept trade-offs they would normally question. They spend to relieve stress rather than to support long-term value. None of this happens because people are careless. It happens because effort is being applied emotionally instead of strategically. The wealthy are very cautious about effort, not because they avoid work, but because they understand the cost of misdirected energy. They know that effort creates friction when it is applied to unstable systems. They know that pushing harder often hides the real problem. Instead of asking, "How can I do more?" they ask, "What is making this so hard in the first place?" That question changes behavior. When something requires constant force to sustain, it is usually poorly designed. Money is no different. If income depends on constant urgency, it creates anxiety. If progress depends on constant presence, it limits scale. Trying harder keeps people inside these traps. They become indispensable to processes that drain them. They tie their identity to being busy. They confuse responsibility with overextension. And money never feels enough because the structure requires constant feeding. The wealthy look for leverage, not intensity. Leverage reduces effort over time. Intensity demands it forever. This is why wealthy people often appear calm in situations that stress others. Their systems absorb pressure. They do not. They build financial lives that do not collapse when attention shifts. They design income that does not disappear the moment energy dips. They remove dependencies that require constant vigilance. Trying harder often delays this redesign. It gives the illusion of progress while preserving the underlying weakness. People tell themselves they will fix the system later, after this deadline, after this bonus, after this busy season. Later rarely arrives. The harder someone tries, the more they justify staying inside a flawed model. Money problems persist not because effort is insufficient, but because effort is protecting the wrong structure. There is a moment, quiet, uncomfortable, when trying harder stops making sense. It usually arrives as fatigue, not physical fatigue, but decision fatigue. The sense that every dollar requires thought, every choice feels heavy, every step forward requires force. This is not a signal to quit, it is a signal to stop pushing and start observing. Observation reveals friction, friction reveals misalignment. Misalignment is where money gets lost. When people finally reduce effort instead of increasing it, clarity often returns. They see which commitments are unnecessary. They notice which activities produce results and which only consume energy. They realize that many financial decisions were reactions, not intentions. And in that realization, money begins to behave differently. Not because effort disappeared, but because it became focused. Effort applied to alignment feels lighter. It does not drain. It compounds. This is the difference between force and direction. Force demands constant input. Direction allows momentum. The wealthy choose direction. They are willing to look slow in the short term to be stable in the long term. They understand that money worsens when pressure replaces clarity, and improves when clarity replaces pressure. Trying harder feels productive. Designing better feels risky, but only one of those choices creates lasting wealth. Money does not need more of you. It needs a structure that makes sense. And the moment you stop forcing money to respond and start aligning your life with how money actually moves, effort finally begins to work for you instead of against you. Chapter 5. Time is the only asset that truly compounds. Most people think money compounds. It doesn't. Money is only a medium, a messenger, a reflection. What truly compounds is time, when it is paired with the right behavior. This is one of the most misunderstood ideas about wealth. People look at numbers growing and assume the numbers are doing the work. They imagine money multiplying itself. They focus on outcomes instead of conditions. But money without time is fragile, and time without alignment is wasted. The wealthy understand this difference early. They do not rush decisions. They do not panic when progress feels slow. They respect time as the primary ingredient that makes everything else work. This is why they protect it so carefully. Time is the only asset that cannot be replaced. It cannot be earned back. It cannot be negotiated with. And yet, most people spend it as if it were infinite. They trade time impulsively. They give it away to urgency. They sacrifice it for short-term relief. They tell themselves they will recover it later. Later rarely comes. The wealthy approach time differently. They think in decades, not quarters. They choose paths that age well. They accept slow beginnings in exchange for durable outcomes. They understand that small, aligned decisions repeated over long periods outperform dramatic actions taken under pressure. This is the quiet math of wealth. Time magnifies whatever it touches. If behavior is disciplined, time compounds stability. If behavior is scattered, time compounds chaos. This is why two people can make similar decisions once and end up in completely different places. One repeats the behavior calmly. The other abandons it when results are not immediate. Compounding requires patience, but patience is not waiting. Patience is continuing without emotional feedback. Most people mistake patience for passivity. They assume that if nothing exciting is happening, nothing is working. But wealth rarely announces itself while it is being built. It grows quietly, beneath attention, beneath comparison. The wealthy trust this silence. They do not constantly check progress. They do not interrupt systems for reassurance. They allow time to do what urgency never can. Urgency destroys compounding. It forces premature decisions. It encourages overcorrection. It turns temporary fluctuations into permanent mistakes. Time needs consistency, not drama. And this is why the wealthy avoid lifestyles that demand constant upgrades. They avoid environments that reward immediate validation. They resist decisions that feel exciting but age poorly. They ask a simple question: will this still make sense 10 years from now? Most people never ask this. They ask what feels good now. They ask what looks impressive today. They ask what reduces discomfort immediately. Time punishes these questions, not harshly, just consistently. Every shortcut shortens the future. Every rushed decision narrows options later. The wealthy are willing to look slow because they understand speed is meaningless without direction. They know that the best financial decisions often feel boring in the moment. Boring is stable. Stable is repeatable. Repeatable is what allows time to compound. This is also why setbacks rarely derail them. They expect variability. They understand that time smooths volatility. When something goes wrong, they do not abandon the process. They adjust calmly and continue. Time rewards continuity. Most people never experience this reward because they interrupt themselves too often. They change direction when progress stalls. They seek new strategies when patience is required. They mistake discomfort for failure. The wealthy do the opposite. They reduce noise. They stay with what works. They let time finish the job. This is not optimism. It is realism. Time does not need belief. It needs space. Space to operate without interference. Space to turn small advantages into meaningful outcomes. When you respect time, money begins to feel less urgent. You stop forcing growth. You stop reacting to every fluctuation. You stop demanding immediate proof. And in that restraint, wealth quietly compounds. Not because you found the perfect move, but because you stopped interrupting progress. Time is not dramatic. It is patient, and patience, when aligned with the right behavior, is the most powerful asset you will ever own. Chapter 6. Why status is expensive and wealth is quiet. Most people believe wealth should be visible. They assume success needs to be seen to be real. That if money is working, it should show up in lifestyle, possessions, and image. This belief is subtle but powerful. It shapes how people spend, how they choose careers, how they measure progress. Status becomes the proxy for success, and status is expensive. Status demands constant proof. New signals, upgrades, validation, it never settles. The moment status is achieved, it begins to decay. What felt impressive yesterday becomes ordinary today. What once felt like a rival quickly turns into maintenance. This is where many people lose momentum with money. They earn more but feel poorer. Not because they lack income, but because their money is now working to support an image instead of building stability. The wealthy understand this trap. They know that status consumes resources while wealth preserves them. Status asks, how does this look? Wealth asks, how does this hold up? These questions lead to very different lives. When people prioritize status, they optimize for appearance. They spend to feel ahead. They choose options that impress in the short term, even if they create pressure later. Their financial life becomes louder, but not stronger. The wealthy do the opposite. They optimize for control, for margin, for the ability to say no. They understand that real wealth is not what you add to your life, but what you no longer have to worry about. Quiet wealth removes anxiety. It reduces dependence. It creates space. This is why the wealthy are often unimpressed by things that excite others. They are not immune to desire. They simply see the cost behind it. They recognize that every visible upgrade usually comes with invisible obligations. Higher fixed expenses, less flexibility, more pressure to maintain income. Status narrows freedom. Wealth expands it. This is also why wealthy people tend to simplify over time. Not because they cannot afford complexity, but because complexity demands attention. Attention is expensive. The more attention something requires, the less scalable it becomes. The wealthy protect attention the way others protect money. They avoid unnecessary decisions. They reduce environments that encourage comparison. They know comparison fuels status anxiety. And status anxiety is one of the fastest ways to destabilize finances. Most people never realize how much money they spend trying to feel secure in the eyes of others. They upgrade not because something is broken, but because something newer exists. They expand not because they need to, but because standing still feels like falling behind. This constant adjustment drains resources quietly. Wealth, by contrast, is boring. It repeats. It stabilizes. It does not require explanation. The wealthy are comfortable with being misunderstood. They do not need their financial life to make sense to others. They value discretion. They value optionality. They value calm. Status seeks attention. Wealth avoids it. This is why wealth often grows in silence. No announcements, no visible leaps, just consistent positioning. When something goes wrong, the wealthy are rarely forced into panic. They built margin instead of appearances. They kept flexibility instead of optics. Margin absorbs shock. Optics do not. Most people never get to experience this difference because they confuse success with display. They believe visibility equals progress, but visibility often signals fragility. The louder the lifestyle, the more fragile the structure behind it tends to be. The wealthy know that the strongest financial systems are the least noticeable. They do not demand attention. They do not require constant feeding. They simply work. This is why wealth feels quiet. It removes urgency instead of creating it. It reduces noise instead of amplifying it. And once you experience that quiet, status loses its appeal. Not because you reject comfort, but because you understand the price. Status is rented. Wealth is owned. And ownership, true ownership, rarely needs to be seen. Chapter 7. The wealthy think in decades, not years. Most people think in years. Some think in months. Many think in weeks. The wealthy think in decades. This difference alone explains more financial outcomes than intelligence, opportunity, or timing ever could. Time horizon shapes behavior. When someone thinks short-term, decisions feel urgent. Pressure increases. Every setback feels personal. Every delay feels dangerous. Short time horizons demand constant reassurance. People want proof that things are working. They want visible progress. They want validation now, and because of that, they interrupt themselves. They change direction too soon. They abandon what compounds. They chase what feels immediate. The wealthy move differently. They accept that meaningful results take time to appear. They are comfortable operating without applause. They allow years of quiet positioning before outcomes become obvious. They understand that wealth is not built by speed. It is built by staying power. Thinking in decades changes how risk is perceived. Short-term thinkers fear volatility. They react emotionally to fluctuations. They confuse temporary discomfort with permanent failure. Long-term thinkers expect volatility. They design for it. They assume that progress will be uneven. Because of this, they are harder to shake. They do not panic when growth slows. They do not abandon discipline when results lag. They do not overcorrect when conditions change. They zoom out. Zooming out does something powerful. It turns noise into data. It turns stress into perspective. It turns patience into an advantage. Most people never experience this advantage because they never give time enough room to work. They want results before foundations settle. They want certainty before patterns form. They want clarity before repetition has done its job. The wealthy understand that clarity often comes after commitment, not before it. They commit to behaviors that age well. They commit to systems that do not require constant attention. They commit to decisions that still make sense when excitement fades. This is why wealthy people often appear stubborn. They are not stubborn, they are consistent. Consistency is misunderstood. It is not doing the same thing blindly. It is refusing to abandon what works just because progress is slow. Most people mistake discomfort for a signal to change. The wealthy recognize it as part of the process. They ask different questions. Not, is this working yet? But, will this matter 10 years from now? That question filters decisions instantly. Many options disappear. Many temptations lose their appeal. Many shortcuts reveal their cost. Thinking in decades also changes how success is defined. Short-term thinkers chase peaks, moments of arrival, temporary highs. Long-term thinkers chase resilience. They want systems that survive stress, lives that adapt to change, financial structures that do not collapse under pressure. They are less interested in winning now and more interested in not losing later. This mindset creates calm. Calm is not complacency, it is confidence rooted in time. When you know where you are headed, you do not rush. You allow compounding to operate. You allow habits to mature. And you allow results to arrive on their own schedule. Most people underestimate how powerful this is. They assume wealth comes from dramatic moves, but dramatic moves are often responses to short time horizons. The biggest financial gains are usually invisible at first. They begin as quiet advantages, small margins, better positioning. Only later do they appear obvious. By then, it feels inevitable. This is the paradox of long-term thinking. While it feels slow in the beginning, it feels effortless in hindsight. People say it happened overnight, not realizing they're only seeing the final chapter. The wealthy do not wait for motivation. They rely on time. They know that if behavior is aligned and repeated long enough, results have no choice but to follow. This is why they are patient. Not because patience is a virtue, but because impatience is expensive. Impatience forces decisions too early. It sacrifices durability for speed. It trades tomorrow for relief today. The wealthy refuse that trade. They give time room to work. They give themselves permission to be early and quiet. They allow decades to do what urgency never could. And in doing so, they turn time itself into their greatest ally. Thinking in decades also changes how people relate to themselves. Short-term thinking ties identity to recent results. A good month creates confidence. A bad month creates doubt. Self-worth rises and falls with outcomes. This emotional volatility leaks directly into financial decisions. People overreact when things go well. They panic when things slow down. They mistake temporary states for permanent truths. The wealthy separate identity from outcomes. They do not ask whether they are winning this year. They ask whether they are positioned correctly for the next 10. This creates emotional distance. Distance allows objectivity. Objectivity allows better decisions. When you are not emotionally fused with short-term results, you stop forcing progress. You stop chasing confirmation. You stop proving things to yourself. Money responds well to this detachment, because detachment removes noise. The wealthy also understand that time rewards boring behavior. Not dramatic effort, not clever moves, but consistency that survives boredom. Yet most people underestimate how hard boredom actually is. They can work hard, they can endure stress, but they struggle with repetition without stimulation. This is why many financial plans fail, not because they are wrong, but because they are quiet. The wealthy train themselves to tolerate boredom. They repeat what works without needing novelty. They trust processes even when nothing exciting is happening. This tolerance is rare, and it is one of the most valuable skills money responds to. Decade thinking also reframes sacrifice. Short-term thinkers see sacrifice as loss. They feel deprived. They count what they are missing. Long-term thinkers see sacrifice as positioning. They see it as narrowing options now to expand options later. This reframing removes resentment. Instead of feeling like they are giving something up, they feel like they are buying time, buying flexibility, buying margin, buying peace. These purchases do not show up immediately, but they compound quietly. The wealthy are willing to delay comfort because they understand delayed comfort often becomes permanent comfort. Immediate comfort rarely does. Another subtle effect of decade thinking is how people choose who they listen to. Short-term thinkers absorb opinions constantly. News cycles, trends, urgent advice. This creates instability. Long-term thinkers are selective. They reduce inputs. They avoid voices that profit from urgency. They understand that most noise is designed to shorten time horizons. Urgency sells. Patience does not. So they protect their mental environment the same way they protect their financial one. They know that how you think about time shapes how you think about risk, effort, and money itself. Over time, this creates confidence that does not need reinforcement. Not loud confidence. Quiet confidence. The kind that does not flinch at slow periods. The kind that does not overreact to success. The kind that stays intact regardless of conditions. This is why the wealthy often appear emotionally steady. It is not temperament. It is time perspective. They live inside a larger frame. Within that frame, setbacks shrink. Delays normalize. Progress becomes inevitable. When you adopt this frame, money begins to lose its emotional charge. You stop needing constant evidence that you are on the right path. You trust direction over speed. You trust time over urgency. And once you do that, you realize something quietly profound. That most people are not losing to smarter decisions. They are losing to longer ones. The wealthy simply stay in the game longer, with fewer mistakes, less noise, and more patience. Time does the rest. Chapter 8. Redefining wealth. Control, not consumption. Most people believe wealth is about having more. More money. More things. More proof that they've made it. But this definition creates a quiet trap, because more has no finish line. No matter how much is acquired, something always appears just beyond reach. A higher standard, a better comparison, a newer version, and without realizing it, Consumption becomes the measuring stick for success. This is where wealth begins to collapse under its own weight. Consumption feels like progress. It feels like reward. It feels like relief. But consumption is not control. It is dependency. The more your lifestyle requires, the less freedom you actually have. The wealthy understand this distinction deeply. They redefine wealth early, not as what they can buy, but as what they no longer have to do. They ask different questions, not what can I afford, but what do I control? Control over time, control over decisions, control over exposure to risk. This is the quiet center of real wealth. When consumption defines success, money becomes fragile. It must keep flowing, it must keep increasing, it must keep up. Any interruption creates anxiety. But when control defines success, money becomes stable. It does not need to impress, it does not need to rush, it does not need to explain itself. The wealthy measure progress by how calm their financial life feels. Calm is not lack of ambition, it is absence of fear. Fear comes from dependency, dependency on income that cannot pause, dependency on lifestyles that cannot shrink, dependency on validation that must be maintained. So consumption feeds all three. This is why many high earners feel trapped. They have money, but no room to breathe. Every decision carries pressure. Every slowdown feels dangerous. Every change feels risky. They are wealthy in appearance, but poor in control. The wealthy avoid this outcome by prioritizing margin. Margin is invisible. It does not show up in photos. It does not announce itself. It does not generate admiration. But margin absorbs shock. It allows mistakes without collapse. It allows rest without fear. It allows choice. Choice is the real currency of wealth. When you have choice, you are not forced. When you are not forced, decisions improve. When decisions improve, outcomes stabilize. Consumption works in the opposite direction. It narrows choice. It increases obligation. It shortens time horizons. And this is why consumption-based wealth always feels temporary. It must be defended constantly. The wealthy are aware of this, which is why they often appear uninterested in proving success. They do not equate spending with progress. They equate optionality with strength. They know that the ability to say no is more valuable than the ability to say yes. Saying no to bad opportunities, no to unnecessary stress, no to environments that demand constant performance. This is control, and control compounds. When you control your time, you choose better problems. When you control your expenses, you reduce pressure. When you control your reactions, you avoid costly mistakes. None of this looks impressive in the short term. But over time, it creates something rare, a financial life that supports the person living it. Most people never experience this because they chase the feeling of arrival. They want to feel successful. They want to feel ahead. They want to feel secure through visible means. But feelings are unstable indicators. The wealthy trust structure, not sensation. They understand that feeling rich and being wealthy are often opposites. Feeling rich usually comes from spending. Being wealthy comes from restraint. Restraint is misunderstood. It is not denial. It is precision. It is choosing what matters and ignoring what does not. This precision creates clarity, and clarity creates calm. Calm allows long-term thinking. Long-term thinking improves decisions. Better decisions compound into control. This is the loop the wealthy protect. They are careful not to confuse lifestyle upgrades with life improvement. So many upgrades increase stress, increase obligations, increase fixed costs. The wealthy ask whether something expands freedom or contracts it. If it contracts freedom, they hesitate, regardless of affordability. This hesitation is not fear, it is awareness. They understand that wealth is fragile when it is built around consumption, but durable when it is built around control. Control also changes how failure is experienced. When consumption is high, failure feels catastrophic. When control is high, failure feels instructive. Margin turns mistakes into data, not disasters. This is why the wealthy are willing to take measured risks. Not reckless risks, not emotional risks, but risks taken from a position of control. They do not gamble stability for excitement. They do not trade peace for status. They understand that the goal is not to win visibly, but to live sustainably. Sustainable wealth does not require constant optimization. It requires alignment. Alignment between income and expenses, between effort and reward, between ambition and capacity. When alignment exists, money stops being dramatic. It does its job quietly. Bills are paid without stress. Choices are made without urgency. The future is approached without panic. This is what most people are actually seeking. Not luxury, not admiration, but relief. Relief from financial noise. Relief from constant calculation. Relief from the feeling that everything depends on the next decision. The wealthy find this relief by redefining wealth entirely. They stop asking how rich they can become. They start asking how little they can be forced. Forced to work longer than desired. Forced to accept poor conditions. Forced to maintain appearances. Every reduction in force is an increase in wealth. This is why the wealthiest lives often look simple. Simplicity is not lack. It is efficiency. It removes friction. It removes distraction. It removes unnecessary risk. And when friction is removed, money flows more predictably. Not faster, not louder, but cleaner. At this point, money becomes neutral. It is no longer the source of stress or the source of identity. It becomes a tool, a quiet one, a reliable one. And that reliability changes everything. You no longer chase money to feel secure. You design your life so security is not constantly threatened. You no longer measure success by what you consume. You measure it by how much control you have retained. This is the final shift. The moment wealth stops being about accumulation and becomes about autonomy. Autonomy over time, over choices, over attention. When you reach this point, money truly starts making sense. Not because you mastered it, but because you stopped asking it to do what it was never meant to do. Money was never meant to define you. It was meant to serve you. And the more quietly it does that, the wealthier you have become. Redefining wealth also changes how you relate to pressure. When consumption is the metric, pressure never disappears. There is always something to maintain, always something to protect, always a standard that must be met again tomorrow. This pressure quietly shapes behavior. People stay in roles they have outgrown. They delay changes they know are necessary. They tolerate environments that drain them because the cost of stepping away feels too high. This is not ambition, it is captivity disguised as success. The wealthy recognize this early. They understand that the highest cost of consumption is not the money spent, but the freedom surrendered. Every fixed obligation reduces flexibility. Every lifestyle expansion narrows options. Every unnecessary upgrade increases dependence. Control works in reverse. The more control you have, the fewer decisions feel urgent. The fewer decisions feel urgent, the clearer your thinking becomes. Clarity creates leverage. Leverage allows you to wait. Waiting allows you to choose. Choosing allows you to act from strength instead of fear. And this is why the wealthy are rarely rushed. They do not need immediate outcomes to feel secure. They do not need constant affirmation to stay committed. They are anchored internally, not externally. Consumption-based wealth is externally anchored. It depends on markets, opinions, appearances, and momentum. Control-based wealth is internally anchored. It depends on margin, structure, and self-trust. Self-trust is built quietly. It grows when decisions are made deliberately, when promises to oneself are kept, when reactions are replaced with intention. Over time, this trust becomes unshakable. The wealthy trust their ability to adapt. They trust their capacity to endure change. They trust that even if circumstances shift, they will not be forced into panic. This trust is what allows them to remain calm when others feel anxious. Because it is not arrogance, it is preparedness. Preparedness is invisible until it is needed, but when it is needed, it makes all the difference. Most people underestimate how much stress in their lives comes from lack of control, not lack of money. They assume more income will solve the problem, but without control, more income often magnifies it. Expenses rise, expectations increase, pressure intensifies. Control must come first. When control is present, money becomes supportive. When control is absent, money becomes demanding. This is why true wealth often feels anticlimactic. There is no dramatic arrival, no sudden transformation, just a gradual reduction in tension. Fewer late-night worries, fewer rushed decisions, fewer moments of quiet fear. In their place appears something rare, stability without stagnation. The wealthy are still curious, still engaged, still building, but they are no longer proving. They are no longer chasing validation through outcomes. They are no longer using money to resolve identity questions. Money becomes boring, and boring in this context is powerful. Boring means predictable. Predictable means controllable. Controllable means sustainable. Sustainability is the final measure of wealth. Not how high you climb, but how long you can remain there without sacrificing peace. This is why the wealthiest lives often look understated. No urgency, no excess, no constant adjustment, just quiet confidence. Confidence that comes from knowing that your life does not depend on appearances, on trends, or on the next financial win. It depends on alignment. Alignment between what you earn and how you live. Between what you value and how you decide, between what you want and what you are willing to ignore. When this alignment is present, money stops being a source of confusion. It becomes a signal that confirms you are living within your means. Not just financially, but emotionally and mentally. This is the deepest redefinition of wealth. Not accumulation, not consumption, but coherence. A life where money supports clarity instead of undermining it. And when you reach that point, you realize something quietly liberating. You were never chasing money, you were chasing control. And once control is restored, money finally knows where it belongs. Money feels complicated only when you're looking at it from the wrong angle. Throughout this audiobook, nothing magical was introduced. No secret strategies, no shortcuts, no promises of sudden transformation. And yet, if you have been listening closely, something important has likely shifted. Not in your bank account, but in how you see money. At the beginning, money may have felt heavy, emotional, unpredictable, something that required constant effort, constant attention, constant worry. But as you moved through these chapters, a different picture emerged. Money stopped being the center. It became a signal, a reflection of structure, of behavior, of time. You saw how effort alone does not create wealth, how chasing outcomes creates pressure, how urgency clouds judgment, how status drains freedom. And you saw something else as well. That money is not personal, it is not moral, it does not reward exhaustion or punish rest. And it responds. It responds to alignment, to clarity, to systems that make sense. This understanding changes the emotional relationship people have with money. When money is misunderstood, it feels like a judge. It creates shame, comparison, fear. But when money is understood, it becomes neutral. It no longer defines success or failure. It no longer carries identity. It no longer decides worth. It simply reflects reality, and reality, unlike emotion, can be designed. This is where real empowerment begins, not by trying harder, but by seeing more clearly. Clear people make calm decisions. Calm decisions compound. Compounding creates stability. Stability creates freedom. And freedom, true freedom, has nothing to do with luxury. It has everything to do with control. Control over time, over choices. Over how much of your life is dictated by money. This is why the wealthy rarely appear rushed. Why they are not reactive. Why they tolerate boredom. Why they think in decades instead of days. They are not chasing relief. They have already designed for it. Most people believe wealth will finally allow them to relax. The wealthy understand the opposite. Relaxation comes first. Wealth follows. When pressure is removed, decisions improve. When decisions improve, outcomes stabilize. When outcomes stabilize, money becomes predictable. Not exciting, predictable. Predictability is underrated. It allows planning without fear, rest without guilt, change without panic. It turns money from a source of stress into a quiet support system. This is why so much visible success still feels fragile, because it is built on constant performance. Constant performance requires constant energy. Constant energy eventually runs out. The wealthy avoid this trap not by doing less, but by designing better. They remove friction, they reduce unnecessary complexity. They simplify their financial lives until patterns become obvious. And once patterns are obvious, money stops feeling mysterious. It becomes logical. This audiobook was never about telling you what to do next. It was about showing you what has been operating all along. The laws were always there, the patterns were always visible. The feedback was always present. The only missing piece was perspective. When perspective shifts, behavior follows. And when behavior follows, results eventually must. This is not optimism, it is inevitability. Money does not need belief, it needs coherence. Coherence between how you live and how you earn. Between how you spend and how you value. Between what you want and what you are willing to ignore. Once coherence exists, money has no reason to feel chaotic. It knows where to go. It knows where to stay. It knows how to behave. And so do you. This is why understanding comes before action. When understanding arrives, action becomes obvious. Not urgent, not forced, obvious. You stop asking how to get more money and start noticing what quietly undermines it. You stop seeking excitement and start protecting stability. You stop proving and start building. This is the moment when money truly starts making sense. Not because you solved it, but because you stopped fighting it. You stopped asking it to give you certainty, status, or identity. You allowed it to return to its proper role. A tool, a signal, a result. And when money is allowed to be what it actually is, it becomes far less demanding. It no longer dominates thought. It no longer drives emotion. It no longer controls direction. Instead, it follows. Quietly, predictably, reliably. This is the quiet wealth most people are actually seeking. Not the kind that impresses others, but the kind that allows you to live without constant calculation. The kind that lets you sleep without rehearsing decisions. The kind that gives you space to think long-term. The kind that does not disappear when conditions change. And this wealth grows slowly, silently, almost invisibly. But once it is there, it changes everything, because the greatest luxury money can provide is not what it buys, it is what it removes. Urgency, fear, pressure. And when those are gone, life opens up in ways no purchase ever could. If there is one thing to carry forward from this audiobook, it is not a tactic or a rule. It is a lens, a way of seeing money that replaces confusion with clarity. Because once you see clearly, you no longer need to be pushed. You move naturally in the direction that makes sense. And when you do, money has no choice but to follow.